Hi, welcome back. Today I'm gonna do a review of this book, which is called Au Revoir Tristesse. This is quite a witty read, but it's also quite an intellectual read. It provides a good framework for those who want to get into French literature. It's written in a kind of memoir kind of way because the author is always saying how her life has been shaped by her interest in France and French literature. We start off with her pointing out that she'd always wanted to learn French so that she could read the literature of France. We're introduced to begin with to Francois Sagan, who was a very adventurous, kind of hedonistic lady, and the kind of lesson from happiness from her is to get out there, I think, and enjoy life. Then she talks about Marcel Proust. And there are numerous authors in this book. I'm not going to mention all of them. She then talks about an author called Victor Hugo, who is very well known and focuses on talking about Les Miserables. This is a novel that points out injustices, and Victor Hugo thinks we can never truly be happy while others are unhappy. He thought that happiness is closely connected to having a clear conscience. So I thought his views on happiness were very inspiring, and they were perhaps my favorite views on happiness in this book. I got very interested in a writer I didn't know about in this book and feel inspired to get into her work. The author is called Marguerite Duras. And in this book, you get synopsises of different works, in this case, L'Amant. And this can really inspire you, I think, to pick up the actual books. You also get very interesting biographical detail about authors without it being so deep that you kind of get bored by it. So you're always led along your journey by an entertaining narrator. So it's a great book to get. Then she talks in good detail about Gustave Flaubert, who wrote Madame Bovary. And this novel is interesting. It's had many feminist interpretations, and it's got many subplots, and it's the kind of book that you can read over and over again. And the author gives a great amount of detail about this book. Another author she mentions that I haven't read is called Edmund Rostand. He wrote Cyrano de Bergerac, which evidently has a kind of anti-bullying message to it, which I thought was quite interesting. Then the author talks about Guy de Maupassant, who wrote Bel Ami, which is evidently about power and ambition. This author, Maupassant, got syphilis, like quite a few of these French writers got. So, despite there being quite a depressing aspect to this book, the author manages to make it light reading, so it is very enjoyable and pleasant to read. The author then talks about Stendhal, who wrote The Rouge et le Noir. The protagonist of this novel is evidently an anti-hero and a bit of a psychopath. This novel is about snobbery. I like the fine details that Viv puts into her descriptions of the authors and the books. In this case, we learned that evidently the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has a copy of this novel. Then Viv talks about a writer called Balzac. He wrote Bête. There have been many feminist readings of this work. I like the way the author Viv talks about the idiosyncrasies of the authors. In this case, we learned that Balzac was a devotee of coffee. Another author that Viv talks about in this book is called Albert Camus. He wrote The Outsider, and Viv focuses on talking about that particular work in this book. I've read The Outsider. It's about a guy who kills someone, but he's always totally open about the fact that he's killed someone, and I think as readers we're meant to see value in his authenticity. Camus' message throughout his philosophical works and in this novel is that life is fundamentally meaningless, which is a very depressing message. And Viv, the author of this book, seems to concur with my view on that. Albert Camus was an existentialist philosopher and believed in much of what Jean-Paul Sartre believed in, which is a very reductive view of life and, in my view, depressing. But maybe by just seeing how bad that view is, we can be enlightened to believe in something. I've seen a lot of people read existentialist works and just abandon that kind of philosophy completely. So maybe there is a route to happiness through that. That's just my little bit of thinking about this. There are other novelists she talks about in this work, but I've mentioned the ones which grabbed my attention. You're never left on your own with understanding French literature with this work. I think it's a great introductory companion to getting into French literature. And there is quite a bit on happiness, though not as much as I would have personally wanted. Basically, I think it's a great work if you want to get into France or French literature. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.